Chapter 1. The stigma of rejection. Zacchaeus wasn't just another tax collector. He was the chief tax collector in Jericho. That alone put him at the very center of one of the biggest social tensions of his time. He was a Jew working for the Roman Empire, the very system that oppressed his people. But worse than that, he profited from it. He wasn't a passive pawn in the Roman strategy. He was an active player, and he was very rich because of it. Among the Jewish people, tax collectors were seen as traitors. They weren't just disliked, they were despised. Zacchaeus knew it. He lived with the glares, the whispers, the disgust in people's eyes every time he walked past. Mothers pulled their children closer when he approached. Religious leaders condemned his lifestyle from the synagogues. He was a man excluded from the spiritual community, from social gatherings, from honor. He had money, yes. But dignity? That was a luxury he hadn't known for a long time. But Zacchaeus wasn't born like that. He had a story, a past that led him to this point. Somewhere, in his childhood, something broke. Maybe he saw how the Roman power gave men like him a chance to rise. Maybe he tasted ambition and realized that wealth could shield him from the pain of being unwanted. Maybe he stopped believing that goodness was worth the cost. Whatever it was, Zacchaeus made his choice, and over time he hardened himself. He became sharp, strategic, efficient, a survivor. He learned to numb the pain of rejection with coins. Gold didn't judge him. Silver didn't spit at his feet. Money made him powerful, and power made him feel safe. But deep down, there was still a crack. He heard the rumors. Everyone in Jericho did. A man named Jesus was passing through, a rabbi, a miracle worker. Some even whispered he might be the Messiah. Zacchaeus didn't care for religion, or at least he told himself that. But something about this man was different. The people didn't just follow Jesus because of the miracles. They followed him because he saw them, even the broken, even the rejected. Zacchaeus' curiosity was strange even to himself. Why would he want to see a religious man? What did he expect? Forgiveness? A second chance? At what cost? He shook his head. Nonsense. He was too far gone for that. But still, he wanted to see Jesus. There was one problem. The crowd. Jericho was packed that day. Word spread fast and the streets were filled. People lined the roads, waiting to catch a glimpse of the man who healed lepers, calmed storms, and spoke of a kingdom, not of this world. Zacchaeus tried to push through, but he was short. He couldn't see past the shoulders of those in front, and no one moved for him. In fact, they elbowed him on purpose. Some laughed at his frustration. Others blocked his path. "Go home, traitor," someone spat. "Jesus isn't for you." Maybe they were right. But something burned inside Zacchaeus. Not pride, not anger, but desperation. A quiet, strange desperation he hadn't felt in years. He didn't want to miss this. So he did something no dignified man of his wealth would ever do. He ran. Not just that, he climbed. Ahead on the road there was a sycamore tree. Low branches, wide trunk. He climbed up like a child, his robe catching on bark, his hands scratching against the wood. But he didn't care. He just wanted to see. And from the branches, he watched, his heart pounding, his breath quick, his pride forgotten. He saw Jesus approaching, and at that moment, something in Zacchaeus shifted. He didn't know yet what would happen. He didn't know that in a few minutes Jesus would stop, look up, and call him by name. He didn't know his life was about to change forever. All he knew was that, for the first time in a long time, he wanted to be seen. Even if it hurt, even if it exposed him, even if it forced him to face the man he had become. This is the beginning of the turning point in Zacchaeus' life, the first crack in the wall he built around his heart. A wall made of fear, shame, greed, and loneliness. In the next chapter, we'll witness what happens when Jesus looks at the man no one wanted to see and chooses to stop. Stay tuned. Chapter 2. When Grace looks up, the crowd kept pressing forward. Dust swirled around their feet. Children ran ahead, shouting that Jesus was almost there. Merchants paused their work. Women stood on their toes. Everyone wanted to see him. This man who spoke like no one else, who healed what no doctor could, who made sinners feel seen and saints feel challenged. But in that same crowd, there was silence in the heart of one man. Zacchaeus, perched in the branches of a sycamore tree, was staring at Jesus. His heart thumped harder with every step Jesus took. For a moment he felt ridiculous. A grown man in a tree, his expensive cloak dusty and creased, hiding behind the leaves like a child, playing a game, but he couldn't move. He was frozen. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Anticipation. Jesus was coming closer, and then he stopped. Not in front of the synagogue, not at the home of a respected Pharisee, not near the temple gates. He stopped right in front of the tree. Zacchaeus' breath caught in his throat. Jesus looked up, eyes met. That moment, that one simple moment, felt like eternity to Zacchaeus. Because in Jesus' gaze, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. Not disgust, not judgment, not rejection. He saw recognition, as if Jesus had known him all along, as if Jesus had waited for this very moment. Then Jesus spoke. "Zacchaeus," he said, "come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." The crowd gasped. People looked at each other in shock. Some murmured, others scoffed. Did he just say Zacchaeus? How does he even know his name? Why would he stay with him? A rabbi, eating with a sinner? But Zacchaeus didn't hear the whispers. All he heard was his name, spoken with authority, spoken with grace. He scrambled down the tree, nearly stumbling, heart racing. Something was happening that made no sense. Jesus, a holy man, had not only acknowledged him, he had chosen him. Out of everyone in the city, Jesus had picked the most hated man to be his host. Zacchaeus stood in front of Jesus, breathless, eyes wide, unsure of what to say. Jesus just smiled, and with that, they walked. The crowd followed, confused, offended, curious. Rumors flew through the streets. "This proves he's not who we thought he was," someone said. "If he really were a prophet, he'd know what kind of man Zacchaeus is. This ruins everything." But Jesus wasn't concerned with appearances. He wasn't chasing approval. He wasn't here for the righteous. He was here for the broken, the lost, the ones who had built walls so high that they thought no light could ever break through. And Zacchaeus, for the first time, let someone in. His house, once a fortress of solitude and wealth, became the place of an encounter that would rewrite his story. We don't know everything that was said at that table. The Bible doesn't record the entire conversation. But something happened in that room that changed Zacchaeus forever. Maybe it was the way Jesus listened. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes. Maybe it was the fact that he wasn't trying to fix Zacchaeus. He simply loved him. And that love, real, pure, unearned, did something no threat, no sermon, no exile could ever do. It broke Zacchaeus' heart, in the best way. At some point during that meal, Zacchaeus stood up. Something had shifted inside him. The walls were crumbling. The fear of what others thought was gone. The greed that had ruled his life felt empty now. For the first time in years, he saw himself, not through the eyes of the world, but through the eyes of grace. He said loud enough for all to hear, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." The room went silent. Jesus smiled again, and then he said something no one expected. "Today, salvation has come to this house, not tomorrow, not after Zacchaeus proved himself, not after years of good deeds. Today. Because salvation isn't about earning your way back. It's about responding to grace with a heart that's been changed." Zacchaeus didn't give away his money to buy forgiveness. He gave it because he was forgiven, because love had reached a place no one else could reach. This wasn't just a moment of kindness. It was a miracle. Not a healing of a body, a healing of a soul. And everyone watching had a choice to make. Would they cling to their outrage and pride, refusing to believe that someone like Zacchaeus could be redeemed? Or would they realize, if he could be seen by Jesus, then anyone could? This is what grace does. It climbs into trees. It looks past reputations. It calls names that no one dares to speak. And it changes hearts. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens after that day, how Jericho reacted, how Zacchaeus faced the people he once cheated, and how living in grace is far more challenging than just receiving it. Chapter 3. The Cost of a Changed Heart. The morning after Jesus visited Zacchaeus' house, Jericho woke up buzzing with talk. Some still couldn't believe what had happened. Others didn't want to believe. How could the most despised man in the city, the corrupt tax chief, the traitor, suddenly claim to be a changed man just because Jesus stayed with him? But for Zacchaeus, everything was different. He woke up that day no longer defined by wealth, status, or fear. His identity wasn't built on coins or power anymore. It was built on a simple truth. He had been seen, known, and chosen by Jesus. But change, real change, always comes with a cost. That morning, Zacchaeus didn't return to his tax booth like before. He went to the marketplace where people gathered early to trade, talk, and listen. He stood where everyone could see him, his voice strong and clear. "To those I've wronged," he began, "I will repay 4 times what I took. And half of what I own will go to the poor." Some gasped, others mocked. A few stared in disbelief. "Is this some kind of game?" one man shouted. "Trying to look holy now, Zacchaeus," another added. "You think you can undo years of corruption with a few coins?" But Zacchaeus didn't respond with pride or defense. He listened. He nodded. He looked people in the eye, many of them for the first time. This wasn't about a performance. This was about responsibility. He went home and began sorting his accounts. One by one, he looked through the names of those he had overcharged, intimidated, or ignored. The list was long. The work was painful. But he didn't hesitate. Some refused to take his money. They didn't trust him yet. They thought it was a trick. And honestly, who could blame them? Redemption is never instant in the eyes of those who've been wounded. Trust isn't restored with words. It's rebuilt over time, brick by brick. But Zacchaeus wasn't trying to be liked. He wasn't chasing approval. He was answering a call. The same voice that told him to come down from the tree was now leading him to rise up in character. In private, he wept. Not because he felt shame. That had already been dealt with when Jesus looked at him, but because he finally understood the damage he had done. He finally felt the weight of what others had carried for so long. And that sorrow, born from love, became the fuel for a new life. He gave away furniture. He sold off land. He parted with luxuries he once considered essential. The house that had once screamed wealth slowly emptied. Not in bitterness, but in freedom. And something beautiful happened. People started to talk again, but differently. I saw him helping a widow yesterday. He actually paid me back. More than he took. He didn't just apologize, he changed. Not everyone forgave him. Some still crossed the street to avoid him. Wounds take time. But a few saw the difference. And slowly, hearts began to soften. Zacchaeus didn't return to his old job. He couldn't. How could he collect taxes for an empire when he now lived for a kingdom that had no borders? He used his skills in other ways, helping the poor navigate debts, organizing aid for the sick, defending the vulnerable from abuse. He became a voice that once hurt people, now healing them. And through it all, one truth guided him. Jesus didn't just visit his house, he transformed his life. This is the cost of a changed heart. It's not just about believing, it's about living differently. It's about facing the people you've hurt, letting go of the idols you once trusted, embracing humility in a world that prizes power. It's not easy, but it's worth everything, because grace isn't cheap. It's free, yes, offered without condition, but it demands everything in return, not out of obligation, but out of love. Zacchaeus' story is a mirror for us. It asks, what would we do if Jesus stopped for us? Would we climb down? Would we open our doors? Would we allow our entire lives to be turned upside down? In the next chapter, we'll look at the long-term impact of Zacchaeus' transformation, how his legacy unfolded, what others learned through his example, and how one brief moment with Jesus can echo through generations. Chapter 4. The Legacy of a Transformed Life. The days passed, then weeks, then months. Jesus had continued his journey toward Jerusalem, where the cross awaited him. But in Jericho, something had changed permanently, and at the center of it, all was the man no one had expected, Zacchaeus. He no longer lived for himself. That part of him died the day Jesus called him by name. His home, once a symbol of greed and exclusion, had become a place of community. People came not just to receive back what was stolen, but to share meals, to ask questions, to find help. The same house that once represented injustice had become a refuge for the broken. Zacchaeus wasn't trying to build a new reputation. He was simply living in truth. And truth has a way of echoing through time. One of the most surprising outcomes of his transformation was how it challenged others, especially those who thought they were righteous. There were synagogue leaders who never forgave him, even after all his restitution. It's too convenient, they said. He's pretending, he's manipulating emotions. You can't erase a past like his. But the more they tried to discredit him, the more their own coldness was exposed. Because while they stood on tradition, Zacchaeus stood on mercy. And mercy speaks louder. Young men who had grown up angry at him started to listen. Not because Zacchaeus preached, but because he practiced. They saw that redemption was possible, that failure didn't mean finality, that change wasn't reserved for the perfect one of them. A teenager whose father had lost everything to an unfair tax had once planned to rob Zacchaeus out of revenge. But now, he was working alongside him, distributing food to the hungry. If he can change, the boy said one night, maybe I can too. Zacchaeus didn't ask for admiration. He wasn't interested in praise. His only goal was to walk in the light, even if others still remembered the darkness. He began teaching others how to manage their finances honestly, not as a professional, but as someone who understood the dangers of money when it becomes a master. He explained how greed starts small, how compromise grows quietly, how guilt buries itself under luxury, and most importantly, how freedom isn't found in keeping but in giving. He visited families he once ignored. He played with children he used to walk past. He sat with widows, sharing bread and stories. His laughter returned, not the hollow kind that echoed through gold-covered walls, but the real kind that comes from peace. And as word spread, people from other towns began to visit Jericho, not to meet a celebrity, but to witness a miracle that wasn't just a moment. It was a movement. This, perhaps, was the greatest proof of his transformation. Zacchaeus no longer centered his life around himself. Everything he did pointed back to the one moment when grace found him in a tree and told him he was still wanted. He couldn't forget that moment. It replayed in his mind often, not as a memory of shame, but as a reminder of mercy. Jesus had seen all of him, the greed, the guilt, the loneliness, and still called him by name. That was the truth he lived in. That was the truth he shared. And slowly the story of Zacchaeus began to change in the mouths of the people. He used to be a thief, they'd say. But now, he helps everyone. He stole from my uncle, but he paid him back. And then some. He's not who he was. You can tell something happened to him. Some still questioned. That's the nature of humanity. But Zacchaeus didn't let it stop him. His heart didn't need the world's applause. It had already heard the voice of Jesus. That was enough. And the ripple effect kept growing. One night, an older man approached him after a community meal. His voice was low, hesitant. "I hated you," he said. "For years. I cursed your name. I prayed for your ruin." Zacchaeus nodded, not in defense but with understanding. "But now," the man continued, "I see what Jesus meant when he said he came for the lost. I was lost too, just in a different way. My pride blinded me." They embraced. Two men, different failures, same grace. This was the legacy Zacchaeus was building, not with monuments, not with titles, but with a daily life that reflected a radical truth. One encounter with Jesus can rewrite a lifetime. His name became a testimony, not of shame but of hope, not of corruption but of restoration. And years later, when people retold the story of the tax collector who climbed a tree, they didn't speak only of what he had done wrong. They spoke of what he became. In the next chapter, we'll dive into the larger message of Zacchaeus' story, how his transformation reveals the very heart of Jesus' mission, and why this moment, short as it was, holds a powerful key to understanding the gospel itself. Chapter 5. The Gospel in a Sycamore Tree. Zacchaeus' story isn't just about one man's transformation. It's a window into the very core of what Jesus came to do. When Jesus entered Jericho, he didn't just change a person. He revealed his purpose. Let's go back to that moment. A crowd was following Jesus. They were hoping for a miracle, a teaching, maybe even a political announcement. But instead of turning to the important, the respected, or the powerful, Jesus stopped under a tree and called a man by name. A man everyone hated. That choice wasn't random. It was intentional, strategic, prophetic. Because in Zacchaeus, Jesus wasn't just saving a sinner. He was making a statement. No one is too far. No one is too lost. No one is beyond grace. The gospel wasn't made for the righteous. It was made for the rejected, for those sitting in trees hiding behind leaves hoping to just catch a glimpse, but suddenly being pulled into the center of the story. That's the scandal of grace. It chooses the least expected. It offends the self-righteous. It flips the order, and it transforms everything. When Jesus said, "Today salvation has come to this house," he wasn't just talking about Zacchaeus' personal faith. He was redefining what salvation looks like. It's not a distant promise. It's a present reality. It's not just belief, it's a new way of living, a restoration of dignity, purpose, and identity, and it's not earned. That's the part we wrestle with. Zacchaeus didn't climb the tree to impress Jesus. He wasn't trying to make a deal. He just wanted to see. But grace met him there, before he apologized, before he paid anyone back, before he promised to change. That's the order of the gospel. Grace comes first, then transformation follows. Too often we reverse it. We try to fix ourselves to be worthy. We hide our flaws, clean up our messes, and then present ourselves to God, hoping we've done enough. But the sycamore tree says otherwise. Jesus looks up before Zacchaeus speaks a word. He invites himself in before Zacchaeus has a chance to prove anything, because grace is a gift. And when it's received, it produces fruit. Zacchaeus' generosity wasn't a performance, it was a response. A natural outflow of a heart that had been seen and loved. And this is where the story becomes even more powerful. Jesus ends his interaction with Zacchaeus by saying, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." That one sentence summarizes the entire gospel. Jesus didn't come to find the best. He came to rescue the broken, to chase the ones who ran, to call names that others erased, to walk into homes that religion avoided, to rewrite stories the world had already finished. Zacchaeus becomes the living proof of this mission. He reminds us that salvation is more than a ticket to heaven. It's a complete transformation of values, identity, community, and purpose. It means turning from greed to generosity, from isolation to restoration, from shame to dignity, and it doesn't stop with one man. Zacchaeus' story traveled. People told it again and again. not just because it was dramatic, but because it was hope in motion. Imagine hearing that story as someone who had failed deeply. Imagine learning that even the most corrupt man in the city could be changed by one moment with Jesus. That kind of story doesn't stay local. It spreads. And here's the most surprising part. Zacchaeus never became a preacher, a priest, or a prophet. He simply lived changed, and that was enough. His life became a message. That's the power of a gospel rooted in grace. It doesn't require position. It doesn't need titles. It only asks for surrender. In a world that measures worth by status and performance, the story of Zacchaeus invites us to look higher, to climb past the noise, to seek a glimpse of something more. And when we do, to find that we've been seen all along. This story is an invitation to the ones hiding, to the ones pretending, to the ones believing they're beyond reach. Jesus still stops under trees. He still calls names. He still says, "I must stay at your house today." And when he does, everything changes. In the final chapter, we'll explore what this story means for us today. How Zacchaeus' encounter with Jesus gives us a model for repentance, a vision for restoration, and a challenge to live lives that reflect the same grace we've received. Chapter 6. The Invitation. Come down from the tree. What happened in Jericho wasn't just a moment in history, it was a mirror for us to see ourselves, and for us to respond. Zacchaeus' story may be over in the text, but its impact continues. Because every single day people are still climbing trees. Not physical ones, but emotional ones, social ones, spiritual ones. We hide behind branches of shame. We perch on limbs of fear. We climb high, trying to see Jesus from a distance, unsure if we're allowed to get closer. And Jesus still stops. He still looks up. He still calls names. He still says, "Come down." This isn't just about curiosity. It's about courage. The courage to respond, to stop hiding, to stop pretending, to let him in. Zacchaeus' story is an invitation to you, and that invitation comes in 3 parts. First, see where you are. Where are you hiding? What branches have you climbed? Success, isolation, religion, performance. Zacchaeus had climbed because he couldn't see. His size, his reputation, his shame, and it all pushed him away from the crowd. So he climbed to look. Maybe that's you. You're watching from a distance. You admire Jesus but don't feel qualified to approach him. Here's the truth. Zacchaeus didn't find Jesus. Jesus found Zacchaeus. Before Zacchaeus said a word, Jesus stopped. That's grace, and it's available to you now. Second, let him in. Jesus said, "I must stay at your house today." That's not a polite suggestion. It's a declaration of love. He doesn't just want to pass by. He wants to enter, to dwell, to transform. Zacchaeus could have said no. He could have stayed in the tree clinging to safety. But he chose to climb down, to open the door, to welcome Jesus in, publicly, without knowing what others would say. And his life was never the same. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out. Jesus doesn't wait for cleaned-up hearts. He enters messy ones, but only if they're open. Third, live the change. Zacchaeus didn't just feel different, he acted different. He gave back. He repaired what was broken. He used his power to uplift, not to oppress. His transformation wasn't silent. It was loud, visible, real. That's what repentance looks like. It's not about saying sorry. It's about turning, changing direction, living with different values, embracing humility, justice, and compassion. We don't follow Jesus to earn grace. We follow because we've received it. So ask yourself, what in your life needs to come down? What needs to be surrendered? Who needs to be repaid, forgiven, embraced? The gospel doesn't stop at forgiveness, and it continues into restoration. Zacchaeus teaches us that salvation is personal, but never private. When Jesus enters a life, others notice. And over time, Those around us begin to believe in the power of transformation, not because of what we say, but because of how we live. This is the challenge of his story. And it's also the hope. You are not beyond reach. You are not too broken. You are not forgotten. The same Jesus who walked through Jericho walks through hearts today. Looking, calling, inviting. Will you climb down? Will you let him in? Will you allow your life to be so radically changed that people won't even recognize who you were before? This isn't just about Zacchaeus anymore. It's about you, about me, about every soul who's ever wondered if grace was really for them. And the answer? Yes. Every time. Yes, when the crowd rejects you. Yes, when you're buried in mistakes. Yes, even when you don't believe you deserve it. Jesus doesn't operate on merit. He operates on mercy. So here, at the end of this story, a new story can begin. Yours. The tree is there. Jesus is calling. Come down. Open the door, and watch what happens when salvation enters your house.